I remember the day clearly. I had been looking forward to spending time with my nephew, Jake. He always brought warmth and joy into my home. That morning, I felt a mix of excitement and nervousness as I prepared my bathroom for our conversation. The sun cast gentle rays through the window, and the steam from the hot water made the air feel cozy. I never imagined that what was about to happen would change my life forever. Jake arrived with a small smile, carrying a gift that he had promised me. We greeted each other with a hug that felt warm and familiar. As we stepped into my bathroom, the room felt safe and private. I wanted to show him how much I cared, and I hoped that this visit would be special for both of us. We stood near the bathtub, and I poured hot water into it, hoping the warmth would ease any tension. Even though it was a simple moment, something in the air felt different. Jake seemed to hesitate before speaking. I noticed his eyes looked sad and his hands trembled slightly. His voice was soft when he finally said, "Uncle, we need to talk about something important." My heart began to beat faster because I sensed that he had something big to share. I asked him what was on his mind, trying to sound calm and kind. He took a deep breath, and I watched his face closely, searching for clues. My mind raced with questions. Why did he look so troubled? Had something happened that he needed to tell me? I tried to stay steady, even though a small knot of worry formed in my stomach. The bathroom was silent, except for the sound of the water dripping from the faucet, and the moment felt heavy with unspoken words. Jake shifted his weight, and I noticed he was avoiding my eyes. It was as if he was scared of saying something that would hurt me. I continued to speak in a gentle tone. "Jake, you can tell me anything. I am here to listen." The kindness in my voice was clear, but I also felt a shadow of fear creeping in. I had a vague feeling that his news might not be good, but I wasn't sure yet. He looked at me, tears welling up in his eyes, and started to speak softly. The words caught in his throat, and he struggled to form them. I felt my heart ache, not knowing what he was about to reveal. It seemed like he was about to confess something very important, something that could hurt our relationship. I waited for him to continue, urging him silently to share his burden with me. As Jake spoke in a trembling voice, I listened carefully. Each word hung in the air, leaving me with more questions than answers. The room felt smaller, and the steam seemed to thicken like the fog of uncertainty between us. I tried to maintain a calm expression. Although inside I was filled with a whirlwind of emotions, the smell of the bathwater, the warmth of the steam, and the heaviness of the moment all blended together in a way that made the situation feel both surreal and frightening. Jake's confession was coming, but I couldn't quite understand what he was about to say. I could tell that he had been carrying a secret for a long time. His hands moved slowly, and each pause he took made me wonder what truth was hidden in his words. I found myself holding my breath, afraid of what I might hear next. There was a feeling in the air that something very personal and serious was going to be revealed. For a few long moments, the silence stretched out, and I was left with nothing but my pounding heart and the sound of water rippling in the tub. I looked at Jake, who seemed to be gathering the strength to speak. The look in his eyes was one of sorrow and fear. I wanted to comfort him, but I also felt a growing sense of dread. What was it that he was carrying, and how would it change our lives? I tried to steer our conversation towards something lighter, hoping to ease his pain, but he gently shook his head. His eyes pleaded with me to listen, and I knew this was not a moment for jokes or distractions. I gently placed my hand on his shoulder, feeling his tension. This simple gesture was my way of telling him that I was there for him, no matter what he had to say. As we stood there in that small bathroom, the reality of the situation began to sink in. I could sense that the story he was about to share would bring a shock to me, perhaps something I had never heard before. Every second felt stretched, caught between my concern for him and the fear of the unknown. The joy of our reunion was fading into a heavy cloud of worry. I wondered if our closeness would be enough to weather the storm that was coming. Our conversation was paused by the subtle sound of a dripping tap. echoing like a countdown to an event I was unprepared for. I kept repeating in my mind that I should stay strong and calm, but I could not shake the feeling that once Jake started speaking, nothing would be the same again. I could see the way his lips trembled, and I knew that he was telling himself something too. The anticipation was like standing at the edge of a dark forest, not knowing what lurked ahead. I remembered how much I cared for Jake, how his laughter filled the room in happier times. Now, his face was clouded with sadness, and I could see that his burden was heavy. He was trying to find the right words to describe a secret that had been weighing on him. Was it something about his feelings? Was it something that involved someone close to us? I could not guess, but my intuition told me that what he was about to reveal would shake the very foundation of our trust. As we stood there, the air became thick with tension. I tried to imagine what he might say, but my mind kept drawing blanks. There were so many possibilities, and each one seemed worse than the last. The fear of disappointment and betrayal lingered in my thoughts, even though I had no reason to believe that was coming. Jake's inner turmoil was now mine as well, and I felt helpless in the face of his pain. Time felt like it was slowing down. The seconds ticked by slowly, and I found myself gazing at the patterned tiles of the bathroom wall, seeking some distraction. But his presence was too strong, and I could not look away. I wanted to protect him from his own fears, but I realized that this was his moment to share his truth. I gave him all the space he needed, silently encouraging him to speak when he was ready. The fear that gripped me was not just for myself, but for our relationship. What if his news would make our bond irreparable? The thought of losing someone so dear was almost too much to bear. Yet, despite all my worry, I was also filled with a strange hope that maybe this conversation could bring us closer, if we faced it with honesty and love. It was a confusing mix of dread and cautious optimism. I saw Jake wipe away a tear, and I felt a pang of sorrow for what he must be going through. I recalled similar moments in my own life, where I had to share difficult truths, and how the fear of the unknown had gripped me. Now it was his turn, and I wanted to be the rock he could lean on. I told him softly, "It's okay, Jake. You can tell me whatever you need to say." My words were simple, but they carried a weight of understanding and compassion. Jake nodded slightly, his eyes still wet, and then he began to speak in whispers. Each word he said felt heavy and slow, like he was pulling out a secret he had buried deep inside. I listened carefully, trying to catch every nuance, every sign of what this revelation might mean. I felt as if the walls of my little bathroom were closing in on me, enclosing us in a bubble of intense emotion. His voice cracked as he spoke, and I knew that what he was saying was painful for him. He mentioned feelings of guilt and confusion, but I could not piece together the whole picture yet. I clung to his words, hoping to find some thread of truth that would make sense of the fear I was feeling. His confession was coming, and with it, the answer to the question that had been hanging in the air between us. But before he could finish, a noise outside our small sanctuary made us both jump. A car passing by or a neighbor's dog barking jolted us out of the moment. For a second, the spell was broken, and we looked at each other with startled expressions. It was a brief pause, but it reminded me how fragile our bubble of privacy was. I squeezed Jake's hand lightly, reassuring him that it was okay to pause, that we could take a moment to collect ourselves. In those small moments of silence, my mind raced with scenarios of what was coming. I wondered if what Jake was about to say would hurt my heart so deeply that it would change everything. Would our relationship ever be the same again? The uncertainty was almost too heavy to bear, yet I knew that I had to be strong for both of us. The simple words of encouragement I had given him earlier echoed in my mind, reminding me that honesty was the best way forward, no matter how painful the truth might be. I took a deep breath and turned to Jake, offering a gentle smile that I hoped conveyed my support. The steam around us seemed to hug us, and for a fleeting moment, I felt a sense of calm. But that calm was fragile, like a bubble that could burst at any time. I sensed that we were on the brink of a revelation that would leave both of us changed. Jake looked back at me, his eyes searching mine for reassurance. He seemed to find some comfort in the fact that I was ready to listen, no matter what he had to say. My heart ached for him, knowing that he was about to share something painful. The atmosphere in the room was thick with emotions, and I could feel the weight of his words hanging in the air, waiting to be spoken. As the moments stretched on, I wondered if I was truly ready for what was coming. I thought about the past, the good times with Jake, and hoped that our bond was strong enough to survive whatever he was about to tell me. The warmth of the bathroom and the closeness we shared felt both comforting and ominous at the same time. Jake finally took another deep breath, and I braced myself for his next words, heart pounding and mind filled with questions. I could sense the truth was near, like a secret waiting behind a closed door. I knew that once that door opened, nothing would be the same again. The questions in my mind multiplied, and I realized that I was about to take a step into unknown territory. In that tense moment, a part of me wished he could tell me gently, as if breaking a fragile vase, so we could both pick up the pieces slowly. But I understood that some truths must come out all at once, even if they hurt. I looked at Jake and tried to show him that I was ready to face whatever he had to reveal, no matter how it might change our lives. The sound of Jake's voice broke through my thoughts, and his words, though soft, were heavy with meaning. I felt a tightness in my chest as he continued to speak, realizing that our lives were about to take a sharp turn. The feeling of dread, mixed with a strange kind of hope as I prepared myself for the unknown. With every word he spoke, I felt the walls of that bathroom closing in on our secret, and the future seemed filled with more questions than answers. I didn't know what the rest of our conversation would bring, but I knew that this day was one I would never forget. The mix of shock, sadness, and anticipation that filled the air made me acutely aware that something profound was happening. Even though fear gripped my heart, I held on to the love I felt for Jake, hoping that it would guide me through the storm that was coming. I felt my heart pound as I stared at Jake. I could not believe what he was about to say. The quiet room was filled with the sound of water dripping from the tap. I was alone with Jake in my bathroom, a place I had always thought was safe and private. The warm steam swirled around us, carrying heavy words. Jake looked down at his hands and took a trembling breath. His voice was soft as he started to tell me something that made my world feel like it was shifting beneath my feet. I could feel the chair in front of me creak as I leaned forward, trying to catch every word, but Jake seemed to be holding back. He looked scared, as if a big secret was too heavy for him to share all at once. Every word he spoke made my mind spin. I listened carefully, my ears straining to hear the truth behind his gentle tone. I tried to imagine why he would choose this moment to share something so serious. The silence between us felt thick, full of questions and doubts. I remembered all the good times we had spent together, and now I felt a cloud of confusion hanging over me. As Jake continued, he told me things that I found almost impossible to believe. He did not say everything at once, but every pause made me want to know more. I could hear his heart racing as he spoke in a low voice, and I could see his face change as he remembered difficult moments. My brain tried to piece together the picture he was painting, but the colors were dark and confusing. I thought of Sarah, my wife, and how our lives had seemed so full of trust. The idea that there was a hidden truth between her and Jake made my stomach twist. I felt a mix of anger, sadness, and shock. I asked him to slow down, but his eyes looked away, as if he was afraid of what his next words might mean. Every minute that passed felt like an eternity as I waited for him to reveal more. Jake paused and looked at me with tears in his eyes. He told me things that I could hardly understand, like how he and Sarah had shared secret moments when no one else was around. He did not give me all the details, but his words were enough to make my heart sink. I tried to breathe slowly, taking in each word as if it were a stone falling into water, causing ripples of pain through my body. I kept asking questions, but Jake's words were careful and slow. He spoke in a way that kept me on the edge of my seat. I wanted to know everything, but some of the details he held back made me even more curious. Every small confession led to more questions. I felt lost, trying to understand how this had happened. I thought about the years of trust I had placed in both of them, and now that trust felt broken. Jake tried to explain how the secret had grown over time. He told me that their relationship was not planned, that it happened quietly and slowly, like a seed growing in the dark. He spoke of whispers behind closed doors and glances that meant more than words. His voice wavered as he described moments when I was so close. Yet I would never have guessed what was really happening behind my back. These words made me feel both curious and angry. I asked him why he waited until now to tell me. His eyes filled with tears as he said he was afraid. He didn't want to hurt me, but he also felt trapped by the secret he carried. This mix of fear and sadness in his voice made me feel something for him, even as I struggled with my own feelings of betrayal. Jake's confession left me in a daze. I found myself wondering if there were more secrets in our family that I did not know about. The feeling of being blind to the truth was overwhelming. I thought about the happy memories I had with both him and Sarah, and how those memories now seemed tainted by hidden lies. He told me that he had not planned for any of this to happen, but sometimes life takes turns that we cannot control. He admitted that he loved Sarah, but he was also torn because he knew that loving her meant breaking the trust of his own family. I listened closely, trying to understand the depth of his feelings. His words were like puzzle pieces that did not quite fit together, leaving gaps in the story that I desperately wanted to fill. I asked him how long this had been going on. He hesitated, and the silence that followed made my heart pound louder. I knew that each second of silence was building my anxiety, but I needed to know more to understand how deep this betrayal went. He finally whispered that it had been happening for a long time, and that the secret was heavy on both their hearts. Jake's admission was a shock, but it was not the end of our conversation. As he continued, I began to notice subtle hints in his words that there were more layers to the story. He mentioned times when I had been away, and how they used those moments to hide their secrets. I felt a chill run down my spine as I remembered those moments, now aware that I had been so close to a secret that I could not see. I looked around the bathroom, taking in every detail as if it held clues to what he was saying. The familiar scent of soap and the warm tiles under my feet suddenly felt like silent witnesses to a hidden story. My mind raced with thoughts and questions. I wanted to understand why they had lied to me for so long. I thought about the love I thought we all shared, and how it had been twisted into something I never expected. Jake continued to speak, and his words painted a picture of complicated feelings and hidden regrets. I learned that his confession was not easy for him either. He had worried about how this would change our relationship. His fear of losing me, or losing a part of his own family, made him hesitate. As he spoke, I could feel the walls of my heart beginning to crumble, piece by piece. There were moments when I wanted to yell or cry, but I held back. I needed to hear him out, even though every word was like a small dagger in my heart. I thought of how the truth had a way of coming out, and I was facing it head-on now. His story was not just about an affair. It was about the deep bonds of family and how those bonds can be torn by secrets. In those moments, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Part of me wanted to run away from the pain, but another part needed to understand the depth of what had happened. I saw Jake wipe his tears, feeling the weight of his own guilt. His sorrow was clear, and it made me wonder if there was a way to find a path through this darkness. Jake mentioned a few times that he wanted to fix things, to find a way out of this mess. His voice held a hope that maybe we could rebuild what had been broken. I listened, not sure if I was ready to believe him, but his words planted a small seed of hope in my mind. I thought about the years we had spent together, about how strong we used to be as a family, and I wondered if we could ever go back to that place. Even as I listened, I felt confused. Why had he chosen this moment, in my bathroom, to tell me his secret? Was there a reason behind the specific place and time? The questions swirled in my mind like leaves in a storm. I did not have answers. And that uncertainty made everything feel even more real and frightening. Jake's story was full of pauses and broken words. He clearly struggled with how much to say. I sensed that he was holding back some details, perhaps trying to protect someone, or maybe to protect me, from the full weight of the truth. His hesitation made me even more curious, and I wondered what more he might tell me if he could just find the courage. The more he spoke, the more I realized that our lives were not as simple as I had believed. There were hidden layers, and his words were slowly uncovering them like peeling back layers of an onion. Each new detail made me want to know more, but I also felt a fear of what I might learn. I felt like I was on the edge of a great unknown, one that could change everything. As Jake spoke, I thought about how trust can be fragile. One small crack can grow into a large chasm. I remembered how I had trusted him since he was a child, and now that trust was being tested in ways I never imagined. His confession made me think about the future and how I would move forward from this point. I wondered if there was any path back to the feelings of safety and trust that once filled our home. I tried to think of ways to cope with the flood of emotions. I could feel tears welling up inside me, but I held them back, not sure if now was the right time to let them fall. I thought about the people in my life who had always been there, and I felt a deep sadness at how things could change so fast. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to do something to make the pain stop, but I could only listen as Jake continued. There was a moment when he seemed to catch his breath, and I used that pause to ask him another question. I whispered, "What happens next?" I wanted to know if he had a plan, if he had thought about how to make things right again. His answer was slow and measured. He said he did not know, but that he hoped we could talk more and maybe find a way to heal. It was a small glimmer of light in a very dark conversation. I realized that I was not just hearing a story about infidelity, but I was part of a turning point in our family's life. Jake's confession was like opening a locked door that had been kept shut for a long time. The truth was out now, and there was no going back. I could not change the words that were spoken, but I could decide how to move forward from this point. As we sat there, the reality of his words sank in deeper. I thought about all the times I had trusted both him and Sarah. My mind flashed through memories of family dinners, holidays, and quiet talks in the evening. All those moments were now tinged with a sense of betrayal and sadness. I felt a strange emptiness inside, as if a part of me had been taken away without me noticing until now. Jake looked at me again, his face full of regret and sadness. He seemed to realize the pain he was causing me with every word he said. He told me that he never meant to hurt me, but that he felt caught in a web of emotions he could not escape. His words were simple, but they carried a heavy truth that I could not ignore. I listened to him speak about the choices he had made, the times he had hidden his feelings, and the moments when he wished he could turn back time. His voice cracked as he remembered how he and Sarah tried to hide their secret, always looking over their shoulders for fear of being caught. It was clear that he carried a burden that was too heavy for one person to bear. Even as I tried to find words to comfort him, I could not shake the feeling that my own life was being unraveled. I asked him if there was anything I could do to help, but he only shook his head gently. He said that the most important thing was for me to understand the truth and decide how I wanted to deal with it. His words made me feel responsible for a choice that seemed bigger than me. The conversation slowly turned from shock to a deeper exploration of feelings. I shared with him how hard it was for me to hear that someone I loved so much was part of a secret that cut me so deeply. I tried to explain how I felt without blaming him, even though I was hurting inside. He listened with a sad look, nodding as if he could feel the weight of my words. In those moments, I saw that Jake was not just a bearer of bad news, but also someone who was suffering from the consequences of his actions. It was a complex mix of guilt, love, and fear that he carried. His honesty, though painful, was also a sign that he cared enough to tell me the truth despite his fear of losing me. As our conversation continued, Jake brought up small details that made me pause. He mentioned specific times when he and Sarah had to be very careful, like when they saw me leaving the house, or when I was busy with work. These hints made me wonder how far their secret went, and how much of my own life I had unknowingly shared with them. I tried to imagine what it must have been like to live with such a heavy secret every day. I thought of the moments when I had turned away, not seeing the subtle signs that something was wrong. The knowledge of their secret made me replay old scenes in my mind, wondering if I had missed clues. This added another layer of sadness to the revelation. I felt like I was chasing shadows in my memory, hoping to find answers that were already hidden from me. Jake also mentioned that there were times he wanted to say something else, to tell me more about the situation, but he was afraid of hurting me even more. This made me see that his feelings were torn between wanting to be honest and wanting to protect me. I respected that, even though I wished he could share everything so that I would not be left wondering. The conversation brought up a lot of questions for both of us. I asked him how Sarah had felt during all of this, and he said she was also struggling with guilt and sadness. I could see that neither of them had planned for the pain they would cause me. It was a tangled web of emotions, and I realized that I was now part of that web. As Jake spoke, I began to see that our lives were on the brink of change. I did not yet know how I would handle this new reality, but I knew that things would never be the same. Every sentence he uttered built a picture of a complicated situation that left me feeling both curious and uneasy. I tried to stay calm, even though inside I was shaking. The conversation went on for what felt like hours, though I lost all track of time. I listened to Jake as he revealed more about the hidden parts of his Sarah's lives. He did not share every detail, but his words were enough to paint a broad picture of a life that had been lived in secret, so very close to mine. I felt a strange mix of fear and hope as I tried to process it all. In that moment, the truth was a heavy presence between us. I wanted to know what would happen next, how we would move forward from this. I could see that Jake was as lost as I was, both of us caught in a moment that seemed to stretch out forever. His words had built a wall of secrets that we were now trying to break through together. I realized that this conversation was just the beginning. There were more steps to take and more emotions to work through. I felt that we had reached a crossroad, where every choice made here would shape the future. The air was thick with unspoken promises and unasked questions, and I knew that the next part of our story would be even more difficult. As we slowly came to the end of our talk for that day, I sat back and tried to absorb everything Jake had told me. My mind was a swirl of feelings: betrayal, sadness, confusion, but also a faint glimmer of hope that maybe understanding the truth was the first step to healing. I did not know where this journey would lead, but I knew that I could not ignore what had been said. The secret was out, and now I had to face what it meant for our family. I could hardly believe what my dear Sarah admitted, and what secrets she would reveal next. My heart was pounding like a drum as I discovered more shocking truths. I sat alone in my small living room, the light from the window casting soft shadows on the floor. I felt as if the ground beneath me might crumble at any moment. The words Sarah had spoken echoed in my mind, and I wondered what would come out next. I tried to stay calm, but my hands trembled with fear of what I might learn. Days passed slowly, each one filled with an aching emptiness. I walked through our home, touching objects that once held memories of love and laughter. Each touch reminded me of the happy times that felt so far away now. Sarah and Jake had changed the way I saw things around me. I tried to remember their faces before the secrets, but it was like trying to hold onto water that slipped through my fingers. The weight of their betrayal sat heavy on my chest, making it hard to breathe. One morning, I decided to speak with Sarah again. I hoped that I could understand why she had hurt me so deeply. When she answered the door, Her eyes were filled with a mix of sadness and fear. I saw the same fear in Jake's eyes when he joined us. We sat in a quiet room, the silence heavy between us. I took a deep breath and asked, "What else do you need to tell me?" My voice was soft but firm, though inside I was trembling with anticipation and dread. Sarah looked at me with tears in her eyes. "I need to tell you the truth about more than just one affair," she said. Her words made my heart sink even further. I listened carefully, trying to pick up every word so I could understand the full picture. What she said next would change everything I thought I knew about my family. She began to reveal that her infidelity was not a one-time mistake. There had been a pattern of deceit that stretched over many months, even years. I heard how she had been unfaithful with people I never suspected, and the shock was almost too much to handle. I felt tears welling up, but I held back. I needed to hear everything to piece together what had happened. The room felt cold and distant, as if we were all inside a snow globe where nothing could warm our frozen hearts. I remembered the first time I suspected something was wrong. There were small hints: a missed phone call, a late night out, a lie told so easily. But I had ignored them, hoping everything was fine. Now those hints made sense. They were just shadows of the truth that was slowly being uncovered. I clenched my fists, feeling the pain of betrayal spread through me like a painful rash. Each new confession was like a crack in the glass wall of my life, and I could see the shattered pieces of trust falling away. As Sarah continued, she admitted that Jake had been more than just a nephew. He was part of her secret life. I struggled with the reality. How could my beloved nephew and my partner both have chosen to hide such truths from me? The anger bubbled inside, but so did confusion. I wanted to shout, to demand answers, but I knew that might push them further away. I needed to understand what had led them down this path. I don't know what to do, and I don't know what to think of it. What are your thoughts on it? I'm curious about other people's opinions on this, and that's why I am telling this story. It is crazy what happened, but I can't deny it. On top of that, I am never able to turn things back.